WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. The Charles Wright Museum of African-American History is one of the most recognizable museums in the city. Its creative and eye-opening exhibits have given us a deeper, more nuanced understanding of Black life and American history.
And as Black History Month gets underway, we wanted to check in with the museum to see what's on tap in the coming weeks and months. Joining us in the studio now is Yoland Jack. She's the museum's manager of community engagement. Yolanda, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. So, Yolanda, what's been happening at the Wright? What do you all have planned this month?
Oh, it's Black History Month every day, not just in February at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History, but certainly during this month, we're really excited to make certain that people are connected to the history that we've been telling, connecting to deeper understandings, finding ways to get connected, looking at those new inroads, you know what I mean? Just finding new connections and new ways to make people understand that Black history is American history, is world history. It's our history, and it's not a bad thing to know.
Exactly. And talk about the significance, especially being here in the city of Detroit, a majority Black city, a historically majority Black city. Being here in this particular space, I know growing up it was something that we did often was going to the Charles H. Wright Museum. So can you just talk a little bit about what it means to have this museum here in Detroit?
It's so powerful to realize that we have an opportunity to highlight not only our world culture, our nation's culture, but also our city's culture and history. The city of Detroit is a historic city. I mean, we've been around since before the United States of America was established. So there's history that we can connect to pre-colonial days. We can connect to history, international history. We can connect to conversations that happen regionally in terms of industry, in terms of enslavement, in terms of culture and music. I mean, everything that touches our world has come from, or been connected to the city of Detroit. Mm-hmm. And our history is one that we can tell in our museums, exhibitions, and so that's what I want people to come and do. Check it out, get connected.
Yes. The Charles H. Wright, once again, was one of the first places that I had a real tangible experience with enslavement of Africans and what it meant and the idea of it and actually seeing it and touching it and being able to see what was happening. So to have that type of knowledge base, especially as such a young person, can you talk about the value of having that type of knowledge when you're so young, especially just to see where we were, where our ancestors were and where we are today?
It's important to talk about history of your people because it's important to know where your people came from. But it's important to know that history across the planet isn't that different from culture to culture, nation to nation, region to region. I have not studied a history or any ancient history of people at all that didn't have some concept of servitude. And so that was a surprise to me when I got to adulthood and realized that there was slavery in Asia and there was slavery in all these other places, not just Black people, not just Africans were enslaved. This was a conversation that opened my mind to the world and how it connected and how the Black people and the Black experience was something that was understood across the planet, not just in Africa, not just in Detroit, not just in the United States of America. So understanding our history helps you get to connect to not only what happens today, how did we get here to today? How did we get through to 2025? How do we get forward to 2027, 2057? Those histories that have gotten our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents through those days that they lived, that's what happened. That was important to them. And those stories come down to us and are retold and reshared over and over again because of their significance, because of their importance. And we don't want to miss the significance and the importance of people of African descent, not only directly from the continent of Africa, from the Caribbean, from South America, right here in Detroit as well. Our great-grandmothers, our aunties, our uncles, and our fathers have done history. We are doing historical things right now. What will be the histories that we create? So these are the conversations that I'm excited about having at the Charles H. Wright Museum, not only this month, but throughout the years and throughout the days that you have an opportunity to come visit the Charles H. Wright Museum as a member or as a visitor across the across the galleries.
And going back to the museum itself, you've been celebrating Third Thursdays for a little while now. Can you talk about the significance of Third Thursdays and how that's helping bring new people into the conversation?
The traditional museum visitor is not often going to go think about grabbing a bite or grabbing a drink at a museum. They're often thinking about the exhibitions that they want to study or learn about. They're thinking about maybe relaxing, maybe they go to the cafe, but not thinking about the blend of the history and the food and the drink and the fun and the music and the culture all at one place, all at one time, where it's vibrant and exciting, as opposed to walking past objects that don't speak to you, or walking past a piece of art that may speak to you but not physically. It doesn't say words. It doesn't touch you physically. It touches your heart. It touches your soul. But now you have a way to engage with somebody who's also been touched by that same piece of art, or inspired to tell this story or sing this song or write this poem and hear this word come from, oh, that different perspective. Yeah, that's what Third Thursday is all about.
I need to be at Third Thursdays. And just really quickly as well, because the way I met you was in a different capacity. So in what way do you use that work as a playwright, as a director, as an actor? In what way do you bring that to your role with the museum and engaging people and finding ways and new ways to tell stories to people today? It's
a lot of fun to think about how theater and storytelling and museums go together. Our history is dramatic. Our stories are dramatic. And so when you're talking about it, you bring the drama to it. Often it's not seen in just an object or just a painting or some small 2-dimensional thing or 3-dimensional thing. When you get a chance to hear the story, when it comes to life, now it means something to somebody. Now I can say, oh yeah, I remember that cup, that mug that had that picture on it, or that t-shirt, or whatever random object that is now significant and important because it tells about a history or about a moment or about a movement.
You're listening to The Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. We're talking to Yolanda Jack about all you can see at the Charles Wright Museum of African American History right now. She's the manager of Community Engagement. Yolanda, can we talk about Charles Wright himself, who was a physician? But you might think that because of how tied his legacy is to this museum, that he was maybe a historian of some sort. Tell us about the man himself and the exhibit centered on him.
Many people don't know that Dr. Wright was an obstetrician and gynecologist in his actual career. He delivered over 7,000 babies, including members of my family, so I'm very proud to have that connection.
What?
Yes. Oh. He delivered my father, my aunts, my uncle, my best friend, some of her brothers and sisters. He did not deliver me. Life does go on. So Dr. Wright was a dynamic man. He was from Dothan, Alabama, a place where I have family and connection to. Most people in Detroit have connection to Alabama. We don't always have connection specifically to a place like Dothan, which is really tiny. But he grew up in a place that was filled with love. His parents were enterprising people. They were entrepreneurs. He was instilled in the belief that you can do more, you can be more. You don't have to be relegated to the life. He was born at a time when segregation was the rule of the day. Not long after the days of enslavement. It wasn't that long before, you know what I mean, since he had been born. So the reality of how how relations in the United States of America impacted citizens was very clear, and your life was very determined as a young person very often in the United States of America. And so Dr. Wright's family did not want to have that presupposed track for him. His mother said, "You're going to be a doctor." And whether he wanted to be one or not, I don't know that he wanted to be one as a young child, but he eventually became interested in the sciences and did go on into becoming a medical doctor. And then not only was he involved in incited and interested in what was happening in terms of how you could heal people physically, he was aware of how the impacts of racism and hatred impacted the mental aspect of an individual, and children especially. That's why he founded the museum, because he was thinking about how these children were being born. He watched these children come into the world, whole, beautiful babies, but then 10 years later or 5 years later, how the society that they had been involved in might have beaten them down or told them they were less than. And so he wanted to find a way for them to understand who they are, what their histories are, where their people are from, what wonderful accomplishments their ancestors were connected to. And not just in a kind of esoteric kind of way. He wanted to be able to point to things, to show them, no, these are your people's things. These are your people's activities and actions. This is the result of your people's work. And so now, particularly as he was involved in the civil rights movement and understanding how things were changing in his actual lifetime, he was born during a time when there was no Black history at all. Being talked about in a regular time. There was no Black History Week. It was established in 1926. We don't have this kind of understanding that we take for granted here now during his lifetime. So he needed to have a place to make certain that there was a location that children, families, community members could go to and learn about these men and women who he was working with in the civil rights movement. Who these folks were, what were they doing, what were the histories, what happened in Bogalusa, what happened in Memphis, what happened in these different locations for voting rights, for education, for whatever it is that people were striving for towards their equality, towards their understanding of themselves as not second-class citizens of these United States, but citizens, period.
Thank you for outlining that history. I mean, Dr. Wright, born in 1918, and for what he was able to accomplish and move through these white-dominated spaces in the way that he did. I mean, Tia and I were just talking earlier about when you are a person of color, specifically a Black person, and sometimes people of color as well, you have to be exceptional in order to ascend these very white-dominated spaces. And even then, that's not enough. But to do it during that time period.
It's unbelievable.
It's something to think about. I mean, just last night, scrolling on the social medias, I saw a video, a clip of a TV show that I watched when I was a youngster, A Different World, and how the character Dwayne Wayne was talking to his students about how he had been taught that you can't just be a standard A student. You have to be an A+ student. And if you're going to compete against MIT students coming from at this fictional school, Hillman, you had to be an A++ student. And that was taught to me in my real life. That was taught to my colleagues and classmates in our real lives. That was taught to my child and my son and daughter and their children's lives. I mean, in their lives, their colleagues' lives. My mother was taught that in her life. How long are we going to tell our own people of African descent, people of color, that you have to compete higher? We're all human. So why should my humanity be less than someone else's humanity? And these kinds of conversations are the conversations that I think when you become interested in history, when you become involved in what happened historically, you can begin to appreciate and peel back some of the issues that were of the day or that are important today that still were important 50 years ago. We're still dealing with racism 70, 100, 4,000 years. I mean, how long has racism been a thing in the United States of America? When will it not be? People are talking about that. My children were hoping for that. I was hoping to see that in my own lifetime. People who are now ancestors were hoping for it as well. When will it be? When will we decide as humans? When will we? And these opportunities of learning about our history, going to these historical locations, going to these places of history that are not just important to my people. When I recognize that this is Anishinaabe land, I recognize that there were people here prior to my existence, prior to the existence of enslavement in the United States of America, who cared for this land. And that's how I'm standing here sitting in this chair right now, on this land that was cared for. There were trees that grew, there were flowers that grew and fed the people and animals of these locations. That's how we're here. And we have to take that baton and bring it forward to the next generation with the kind of intentionality, with that kind of focus of what we're here for. Are we here to bring people together, or are we here to tear people apart?
Yolanda, I think that the argument could be made that a lot of the problems we face today in society are because we don't understand our history. So I wonder what you're doing to engage young people and to get more folks to see that history, to see that understanding in the last minute and a half that we have here.
One of the things that we were taught as children and Africans were taught that they had no history. Well, that's been a conversation that's been going on for over 100 years, and here we are still proving that our history not only exists, but it is also very valid, and if it weren't for the histories of these people, that we wouldn't have where we are today. This kind of conversation of understanding, if you don't know where you've come from, you won't know where you're going. That's an old adage, but it is so true. It speaks to the fact that this ancient concept of Sankofa, going back to getting it, to bringing it to the fore. These are things that come from our ancient histories. Our grandmothers taught us these. Our grandfathers taught us these. If we don't know what happened, we can't know where we're going.
Yolanda Jack is the manager of community engagement at the Charles H. Wright Museum. Yolanda, thank you for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you so much.
At 11 on the Metro, more people are distrustful of traditional medicine, and folks are experimenting with alternative forms of healthcare practices, things like yoga, acupuncture, and meditation. In the next hour, we want to hear from you. What do you do to improve your health? Give us a call. The number is 313-577-1019.
This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. And this is the Metro. Stay with us.